This is the Sawtooth Star block that I am making with you as part of the Power of 3 quilt. I designed it to take advantage of my color wheel and to use a triadic color scheme, which is red, yellow, and blue. So it's red, yellow, and blue, and then a background fabric. So when you are going to make this block, you will definitely want to have some sort of a low volume background fabric in mind. And then you will want to have at least the 2 colors to really set the star off. But I like putting these half square triangles in the corners. And so for this version, that's what we're doing. Honestly, there are so many different ways to make the Sawtooth Star. I went ahead and just did a big solid block in the middle. This can also be another place to play with design, but for the purposes of this block, for this project, for this video today, this is just going to be one solid block. What else can I tell you? I can also tell you that with this block, everything is done using half square triangles. So all of the blocks going around the center piece are all half square triangles. And so it's the way that we rotate those half square triangles that give the shape and design to the star block. This block is designed to be a 12.5-inch finished overall block. And so that means each of our small blocks will need to be in a finished size of 3.5 inches. So you have 4 across, so 3 times 4 is 12. And the 1/2 inch refers to our standard seam allowance of a 1/2 inch that we use in quilting projects. For this video, I'm not going to go over how to make half square triangles. I have a pretty thorough video on that I will link for you. So if you're not sure how to do that, I'm going to refer you over to that video. So, okay, let's look at what we're going to use to construct this block. And I do have a written pattern that I will have on my website, and you can go over there if you would like to see the diagram and how to actually put this out. I know sometimes it's helpful to have that. So I'll link to that in the description below. But the first thing we're going to work on is the center. And this is, I did mine in navy blue. So that is a 6.5-inch block. Then 2 of the reds, and these are cut at 4.5 inches. And then this is the yellow that is going to be the star points on the piece, and we're going to need 4 of these, and these are all cut at 4.5 inches. And then our background fabric, also cut at 4.5 inches, and we'll need 6 of these. So for now, we're just going to put that centerpiece off to the side, and then the first thing we'll do is to pair all of these colors to a white or the background, your low volume. And what I'm going to do is find the straight of grain side, which is the side with the least amount of stretch. I'm going to put my fabrics all right sides together and then set up for my half square triangle. I'll do one to show you what I do. I have this particular ruler that I like, and it has a really clear 1/4 inch seam allowance, and so what I do is line the center line to the center, the points on the squares, and then I'm just going to draw a line. And that line is a 1/4 inch off of the center. And what I've done is I have drawn my sewing line. So what I will do is then clip this on both sides so that it doesn't move. And when I get all of these pieces set up like this with my sewing lines sketched onto the light fabric, I will go to the sewing machine and I'm just going to sew right on that line. So let me go ahead and get all of these ready to go. and we'll get them stitched and come back and take a look. I've chain pieced all of my blocks, and what that means is I just feed them one after another through the machine, and I do have a video on that I will share with you. But essentially I have sewn on the sew line, so both of those lines, and this is our half square triangle unit over here. And now what we're going to do is to trim. So we just go right down the middle, and then this is your half square triangle. Isn't that magic? I just love that. So I'm going to trim them all and then take them over and press them out. And what I will do is first hit the stitch line, which I should tell you I'm using a 2.5 millimeter stitch. And so I'll set the seam, and then the dark side is up, and then I will do what they call press to the dark side. Okay, and then basically you'll press it this way, and then all of your seams will go that way to the dark. So the trick is whatever side you want to have the color or have the seam go to, you put that on top. So put your dark on top, set your seam, and then open it, and then as you press it, it will automatically go to the dark side. Okay, let me just finish trimming these out. Okay, I've got all my little squares pressed out, they're ready, and I have trimmed the first one. And I want you to see how, like, just, I don't know, kind of crazy it is. Look at the difference in the size. So this is the untrimmed. And obviously you can tell that because it's still got those little dog ears. But it's also kind of cattywampus. I mean, you know, it's just not, it's not perfect and true. And if I try to just piece them with this, I'm going to wind up with a block that's not as square as it could be. Whereas if I take this piece and trim it down to square it up, you can really see the difference. So what I do is, and this is my method, so this is how it works for me. I have a little bit of trouble with being consistent when I have to count, and all of the lines and all of the things, it just sort of runs together in my brain, and I have trouble with it. So the way that I do it is I will take that sewn half square triangle, and then I get the square and the size that I'm going to use, and I know for this one it's 3.5 inches. And then what I'm doing is I'm lining up that diagonal line. So at either end, so that line is following the line of the seam, okay? And then I'm just going to trim off those edges. It's funny to me how if you go with the 7/8 of an inch, you barely have anything left to trim, but if you go ahead and size it up that to the full inch, gosh, you just have so much more wiggle room when it comes to trimming off. So those are your trimmings. I mean, by the time that you're done trimming all of your stuff, it maybe is the size of one square, but probably not. You know, I am willing to sacrifice this much fabric in a block to have more accurate squares because they just go together perfectly. All of our components for the Sawtooth Star are trimmed and as they should be, and so now what we're going to do is to lay out the block, and that will tell us what we're going to sew. And I'm just going to kind of refer to my pattern over here. And I find like it's easiest if you just sort of go ahead and get your corners out where they need to be and give yourself space to lay out. And you can get a little bit turned around when you're doing your call it the rays of the sun, or the rays of the star. This part can be a little bit confusing to get right. So just kind of be patient with yourself. And something that's interesting is that when you're laying out your block, it can look perfectly fine to your eye as you're laying everything out, but then you've made a mistake somewhere. And so what I always recommend for people is to, once you have your pieces in place, take a picture of everything first. So just do a really quick overhead snapshot and then look at that picture, and that will clearly show you if you've got something messed up, because you can pretty easily have something like this. And as you're watching the video, that's really obvious to your eye, but for some reason, when you're in real life and you've got everything laid out in front of you, you can miss that type of thing real easy, and then you've got to rip everything out. So I like to get the sewing done the first time and not have to go back and rip and resew, although, it is part of the process, but I like to gloss over doing that as much as possible. So, okay, all of our pieces are in line. They're where they need to be. And what I want you to see is that what we have here is 3 rows. Okay? So we've got this row. We have our middle row that's kind of a wide row. And then we've got the other finish row down here. So 1, 2, 3. And so I'm going to construct this in rows. So that means I need to get these 4 pieces together, and then these 5 pieces together, and then these 4. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to start, and I'm going to carefully lay those pieces together. And you do want to line up the seams on the half square triangles, because that's how you're going to get your points. And what I like to do is, so I know I want to sew here together. So what I'm going to do is then put those right sides together. I'm going to get them all lined up, just where they need to be. And then I'm going to clip right here. And that tells me when I take all of these over to the machine, because I'm going to put as many pieces together at once as I can, and then go to the machine and chain sew all of them. But that tells me this is where I need to sew. And so then we're going to do this one. Now when I'm at the machine, if I want to just double check and make sure that everything's lined up as it needs to be, I can do that. Okay, we'll do the bottom. Alright, I've got my first units constructed, and let's go ahead and put them back in place so that we can see where everything goes. And let me show you that I pressed all my seams open. So on the triangle units, they are to one side, and then when I put them together, I press open. And I do that because of this landmark. And this landmark on the wrong side tells me that when I'm sewing, as I'm approaching as the needle is coming down and approaching, I want to make sure that I'm on just to the left-hand side of that point. And if I keep my seam over to that side, then I will retain that point. And that's what we want. So now that we've done the initial sewing, let's put our block together so that we can see where everything goes. And it's, it's kind of a puzzle. You're putting puzzle pieces together. And there we have it. Okay. So now you can see our row 1, row 2, and row 3. So the next step of what I'm going to do is to finish the rows. So we're going to then turn these this way. And it's pretty much the same procedure that we just did, where we're going to, on that center line, whoops, make sure that our seams over here line up the best that we can, because that will give us the best look. And I will straighten these at the machine before I send it through. Now for the middle row, what we're going to do is we're going to turn these this way. So that will be the right sides together. And then as you can see, there's that bit. So we're going to get it as squared up as we can. And now as I run this through the machine, this is the side we're going to sew the seam. When I get to here, I want to make sure that I'm on this side. And if I'm on that side, then I'll wind up with something that looks like that. Because we want this, right, with the point. We don't want that, if we can avoid it. Or even this. I mean, you know, let's be honest. You know, nobody's gonna, lose something of value because we don't get our perfect points. But it's always nice to do our best in any of these projects. So we're going to turn this one this way. Okay, so I'm going to wind up sewing on the sides where the clips are. And then we'll come back and we'll finish the block. And I do a different little bit of a pressing on the middle, and I'll show you that. So I'm going to sew and then press, and then we'll be back. Our 3 rows are constructed, everything is put together, and so now we're going to lay out for the final block. And there it goes. And, you know, you can get really turned around at this step also, because, you know, when you're just looking at it, you might think that's fine. It's just funny how it doesn't register to your eye. So if you need to, take a picture at each one of these steps and make sure that everything is where it needs to be. So I want you to see that we've got our points meeting here, and our points are here, just like they should be. And then we'll turn it over, and you can see all of these are pressed open, and then there's my landmarks. And these landmarks will become important when the block itself is pieced into the next step of the project, which for this one will be a sash. So now we're going to put them together, and you can see that what we really want is we want to have these seams line up. Okay? Those intersections. And for this step, I will pin. So what I will do is the 2 seams where it's critically important, it's not critical, you know, nobody's going to lose their life because you don't get a seam, but, you know, we regard this as being important in our quilting. So anyway, you just want to get that pin through the seams just to make sure that everything lines up. Okay? And then what I do is I go ahead and line up the outer part of the block so that everything is as square as possible. And definitely on the end of the sew line, because things will just sort of move around. You know, your machine feeds at different rates between the feed dogs and the presser foot, and so things will shift. It's just part of this whole thing, getting everything where we want it. Okay. And And then I'll turn this one, and I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do that off camera so that I can actually see what I'm doing and make sure that all of this is neat and the way it needs to be. And we'll come back and we'll have the reveal. Here's our beautiful Sawtooth Star, completely constructed. Everything is together, and I think it's beautiful. So you can see that we have all of our points meeting up, which I just think it's such a gorgeous thing when it works. Let me show you the back. So for the pressing, you can see that all of the seams are open except for this in the middle, which is pressed in. So for the middle row, I pressed towards the dark, which is that large center square, but everything else I pressed open. And this will be important when it comes time to sew this into the other part of the project, the larger project, because now I have all of my landmarks all the way around, so that when I sew this, it'll be a sash to go around. So when the sash goes on, it will retain all of my points, because you know you want to have the points all the way around your block. So that's how you put it together. And you can see over here, I have 4 of them. So these 4 will go into the first row of the Row Quilt project that I mentioned to you earlier, which is called the Power of 3. And I named it that because it's based on using three colors that you select using the color wheel. So I went with Triadic, which is red, yellow, and blue. And this was my original design that I drew. And so you can see how the concept, let's see here. So here's how the concept of the block in my design process, and then here's the finished. And so I took some time really thinking about where to place those colors. Yeah, I will leave links below where you can find more information on the quilt along if you're interested, and the other blocks that will go in the series. I think they're all going to be so beautiful together. But there's our first, our Sawtooth Star, and I sure hope that helps you on your journey towards understanding how to construct this beautiful classic quilt block. That's it for today. I sure appreciate you watching. And as always, my friends, happy quilting.